So do you know what volcanoes, banana empires, and celebrity hideaways all have in common? Well, they're all part of the story of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. And in this video, I'm taking you on a journey to discover the wild history, stunning geography, rich culture, and surprising politics of one of the most fascinating countries in the Caribbean. So don't click away. Long before cruise ships and coconut cocktails, Saint Vincent and the Grenadines was home to a mix of indigenous peoples. The first to settle were the Siboney, followed by the Arawaks from South America. But around the 1300s, a fierce new group called the Caribs arrived. They conquered the Arawaks and made the island their own. Then, in 1498, Christopher Columbus supposedly passed by the main island on January 22nd, the feast day of Saint Vincent. People used to celebrate that day as Discovery Day. But here's the twist. Columbus was still in Spain on that date. So, did he ever actually step foot here? Probably not. By the 1600s, the island's story took another turn. A group known as the Black Caribs, or Garifuna, began to form. They were descended from the local Caribs and Africans, many of whom were shipwrecked, escaped slavery from nearby islands, or freed during raids. Over time, they created a unique culture that was both African and indigenous. But as always, Europe came knocking. The Caribs fought off repeated attempts by the British, French, and Dutch to claim the island. And eventually they allowed some French settlers on the western coast, hoping to gain allies against the more aggressive British. That worked, but only temporarily. In 1763, the British officially took control of St. Vincent under the Treaty of Paris. The Caribs didn't take this lightly. They resisted British rule through two major wars. Between the two, the second, which happened in 1795, ended with a brutal result. Over 5,000 Caribs were exiled, sent to a small island off the coast of Honduras. From there, many later moved to Belize and other parts of Central America. The British took full control, and St. Vincent was folded into the Windward Islands, a British administrative group. There they were growing sugar, cotton, coffee, and cocoa. And like many colonies in the Caribbean, this economy was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. In 1834, slavery was finally abolished, freeing more than 18,000 enslaved people. But the plantation owners weren't ready to let go of cheap labour, so they brought in workers from Portugal and South Asia under indentured contracts, hoping to weaken the bargaining power of the newly freed people. But toward the late 1800s, the island's economy crashed. Sugar prices dropped, a hurricane hit in 1898, and then in 1902, La Soufriere volcano erupted, destroying farmland. Sugar was basically wiped out, and crops like arrowroot and sea island cotton stepped in for a while, until bananas took the crown in the 1950s. As the economy shifted, so did politics. In 1925, a small legislative council was created, but it didn't represent most people, especially those descended from slaves. That changed in 1951 with universal voting rights. Around the same time, St. Vincent joined the short-lived West Indies Federation, hoping to build a stronger, united Caribbean. Unfortunately, those hopes didn't last long. Eventually, the Federation collapsed and St. Vincent started charting its own path. It became an associated state of the UK in 1969, joined CARICOM in 1973, and finally gained full independence in 1979. And the first Prime Minister of the new country, his name's Milton Cato, a passionate Caribbean nationalist who wanted closer ties with neighbours like Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. But 1979 wasn't all celebrations. That same year, La Soufriere erupted again, damaging farms and hurting tourism. A year later, Hurricane Allen hit, crushing the banana industry. And you'd think natural disasters would be over by then. But the following decade wasn't smooth sailing either, especially with rising unemployment and fewer tourists due to a global recession. But in 1984, a new leader took the reins. James Mitchell focused on building up agriculture and creating jobs. He stayed in power for over 15 years until Arnhem Eustace briefly took over in 2000. Then came Ralph Gonsalves, leader of the Unity Labour Party, who was elected in 2001 and has remained a key figure in the country's politics ever since. Over the years, St. Vincent and the Grenadines pushed for deeper regional unity, joining forces with neighbouring islands to form stronger economic ties. And in 2009, a new constitution was proposed. one that would replace the British monarch with a local president and set up a Caribbean-based court system. But in a national vote, the people said no. Then in 2021, history repeated itself once more. La Soufrière erupted again, forcing over 22,000 people to evacuate. Which brings us to the next topic, geography. Saint Vincent and the Grenadines is a stunning island country tucked in the eastern Caribbean Sea. It's part of a group of islands called the Lesser Antilles, and it's made up of one big island, Saint Vincent, plus over 30 smaller islands, and cays known as the Grenadines. The main island, Saint Vincent, is the biggest of them all. It's shaped kind of like an oval and stretches about 18 miles long and 11 miles wide, or 29 by 18 kilometres. It's tucked in the southeastern Caribbean, about 20 miles or 32 kilometres southwest of St. Lucia, and around 100 miles or 160 kilometres west of Barbados. Nearby you'll find some of its more famous Grenadine neighbours, like Bequia, Union Island, Canouan, Moustique, and the stunning Tobago Cays, which today are a protected wildlife reserve. At the heart of all this is Kingstown, the capital and main port, sitting along the southern coast of St. Vincent. But the real showstopper is the island's bold, mountainous spine. It's essentially a line of volcanic peaks that cuts right through the centre, splitting the island into two distinct halves. On the east you've got gentler, sloping terrain, and on the west it's all steep ridges and rugged cliffs carved deep into the land. Towering above everything is La Soufrière, the island's dominant and still active volcano. It rises to 3,864 feet, or 1,178 metres, and takes up the entire northern third of the island. This beast has blown its top several times, as we've seen in its history. And although some of those eruptions were deadly, the 2021 disaster forced over 22,000 people to evacuate, but no lives were lost. And here's a crazy twist of fate. Despite all that danger, the ash from La Soufrière has made the soil incredibly fertile. That's why the island is bursting with lush greenery, vibrant hibiscus and poinsettia blooms, and farms growing everything from bananas and arrowroot to veggies and tropical fruits. You'll even spot terraced farming carved into the steep hillsides to keep erosion in check. Then, when it comes to rivers, St. Vincent doesn't really have any large ones. Just lots of quick-moving little streams that swell after heavy rain. They're not great for navigation, but they do add to the island's lush, rainforest-like vibe. And speaking of rain, the weather here is classic Caribbean, tropical, warm and humid. Thanks to northeast trade winds, it stays breezy too. In Kingstown, temperatures usually range from the mid-60s to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 18 to 32 degrees Celsius, depending on the time of year. The hottest stretch is from June to September, when it's extra warm and sticky, while the wet season kicks in from June through December. One thing to keep in mind is that the islands sit in hurricane territory. Some of the biggest calamities happened in 1780, 1898, 1955, and 1980, which all brought serious damage. Yet through all the eruptions, storms, and wild terrain, St. Vincent and the Grenadines remains one of the most breathtakingly beautiful places in the Caribbean. So now the question is, how is the country actually run, and what keeps the economy moving? To answer that, we've got to start with the basics. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a constitutional monarchy, meaning it recognises King Charles III as its head of state, but he's represented by a local Governor-General. The real day-to-day decisions are handled by the Prime Minister and the House of Assembly, their version of Parliament. The House has 15 elected members and 6 appointed senators. Citizens vote every 5 years, and everyone over 18 gets a say. So, technically it's also kind of like a parliamentary democracy, just like many other Commonwealth nations. Now on to the economy. For decades, agriculture was the backbone of St. Vincent, and in many ways it still is. The country was once the world's top producer of arrowroot, a starchy plant used in cooking and medicine. Though that industry has declined, arrowroot is still grown today, particularly in the northeast. But the real agricultural powerhouse now is bananas. They've been the country's top export since the 1950s, shipped across the region to neighbouring Caribbean islands. Besides that, the fishing industry is also gaining ground. From lobster and conch to tuna and swordfish, seafood from these waters is ending up on dinner plates as far away as Miami and New York, which honestly is a huge deal for a small island nation. So in 2024, the country's GDP was just over $1.15 billion US dollars, according to the World Bank. That number reflects both its small size and its ongoing efforts to diversify the economy. And lately, one sector is starting to shine: tourism. The Grenadines, which comprise those smaller islands stretching south of Saint Vincent, have become a magnet for travellers chasing sun, sand and sea. With coral reefs, quiet coves and crystal clear waters, they're a favourite among yachters and sport fishers. In fact, Mustique, one of the islands, is even privately owned. It's home to luxury villas, celebrity hideouts and jaw-dropping vacation rentals. Meanwhile, ecotourism is catching on across the main island, where lush forests, waterfalls and the mighty La Soufrière volcano are drawing adventure seekers. But if there's one thing Saint Vincent and the Grenadines knows how to do, it's to celebrate. Carnival is the biggest event on the calendar, and when it rolls around, the islands come alive with music, dancing, parades and a whole lot of energy. But that's not the only time the streets light up, because in the days leading up to Christmas, there's something called the 9 Mornings Festival. It started out with early morning parades, caroling and even bicycle races. These days in Kingstown, you'll find more early morning concerts instead. But out in the countryside, folks still keep the old traditions alive, mixing in local dances and cultural revivals to keep their roots strong. And if you happen to be on one of the Grenadine Islands, don't be surprised if you stumble into a regatta packed with carnival vibes. But if you want to stay in the centre of the action, Kingstown is the place to be. Here you've got the Botanical Gardens, founded way back in 1765, and Fort Charlotte, which has been standing since 1806. Then there's also St. George's Cathedral, a beautiful Georgian-style church that looks like it belongs on a postcard. Heck, even the courthouse and police barracks have stories to tell, with architecture that dates back to the 18th and 19th centuries. Food-wise, globalization has definitely left its mark. Supermarkets carry imported products from all over the world. But more people are starting to shift back toward local foods, especially as health and nutrition become bigger concerns. So you'll find vibrant markets full of fresh fruits and vegetables, and if you want to eat like a local, try the national dish, roasted breadfruit and fried jackfish. And when the locals aren't eating, dancing or celebrating, they're probably playing sports. Cricket is the national obsession, and the Arno's Vale Sports Complex in Kingstown often hosts major international matches. Some homegrown players have even made it to England's professional leagues. But it's not just cricket. Football or soccer is huge too. Vincentian teams have competed in the Caribbean Cup and even the Gold Cup. And yes, St Vincent and the Grenadines has made it to the Olympics, first stepping onto the world stage at the 1988 Seoul Games. Vincentian athletes also compete in the Commonwealth Games and tend to hold their own. But when it comes to international recognition, the islands might be best known for their stunning waters. Calm, clear and perfect for sailing, surfing and diving. It's paradise for anyone drawn to the sea. But on land, it's the culture, the people, and their spirit that really make these islands unforgettable. So here's a question for you. If you could spend a week exploring either the lush green peaks of St Vincent or the sun-drenched Grenadine Islands, where would you go first and why? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you loved this video, you'll definitely enjoy this next one.